Hello. Welcome to today's webinar on Reimagine Performance Management. This is part of AKT's Digital HR Insights series. So let me introduce AKT to all those first-time guests. Since 2002, AKT has grown its HR consultancy and HR cloud implementation services with customers across Europe and the Middle East. We have more than 100 staff across several offices in Europe, and together we have achieved 150 and growing SuccessFactors implementations. Our presenters today, Etan Bernstein and Danny Cohen, who is filling in for Yoav Ventura today, are seasoned and certified HR and SuccessFactors experts. They have led many digital HR transformations, so they have firsthand experience of the HR challenges and opportunities being faced by customers today. Before I pass this presentation to our first panelist, I would like to virtually break the ice. So all of you are now seeing the poll, which indicates some questions with regards to the main driver of the change that you wanted to make in performance management practices.
This is Etan. We see you're voting on your polls, and one of the things that's interesting is that many of you have indicated that the main reason that your organization is looking into making a change in performance management is around creating a culture of continuous feedback. Many of you others have also related to improving company and individual performance and making talent management simple and data-driven. And I think that's very, very much connected to findings we're going to show you and share with you in a few minutes. I think many of you are here because you have a sense, like many people, that everybody hates performance management. One of the things we've seen in the recent few years is that both the professional journals in HR and many of the publications around business have related to, the fact that employees don't like this, managers don't like this, HR doesn't like it, and many companies have published recently in the last year or two that they're throwing away performance management, blowing it up, changing it, why year-end reviews are a big fat waste of time, and so on. I'm sure you've seen many of these, and that many executives and managers and employees in your organizations have shared with you this. And it's not all that true that many of these companies have actually completely gotten rid of performance management, but many organizations are thinking about how to change it and feel that their processes are not effective for many of the same reasons you marked in the first poll. And when we asked, when Deloitte asked companies how much they feel that their performance management processes are driving real value, as you can see here, most companies indicated that their processes are not driving real performance. They're not helping develop and provide feedback to people. They're not engaging employees significantly. And they're not an effective use of people's time. And so many organizations are looking at making changes, and that's not a surprise. I'm sure at least some of these reasons are reasons you feel in your organization. One, the timing of processes really doesn't make sense in an agile, fast world. Who said that January or February, if your annual year is January to December, is a good time to do feedback? Organizations in the middle of projects, units may be very busy at exactly that time, but most organizations have an annual cycle that doesn't necessarily really fit the life cycle of employees in their organization. Frequency, most companies still do performance management processes once or twice a year, and we know that that's not sufficient as a real efficient way to provide feedback ongoing and immediate to people. Still, many organizations have some form of forced distribution under the assumption that most units will have great performers, medium performers, and low performers, but that's not exactly true in some organizations, and it's created a lot of struggle and resistance to the process. Most companies' performance management is still very much backward oriented, looking at the past, instead of looking at the future and helping direct people toward what they need to be doing in the future and how they can succeed, instead of summarizing what they did in the past, which the history is gone and it's behind us. Most companies still have the direct manager as the single primary and main assessor of employees, when we know that organizations are actually becoming flat, dispersed, And the direct manager may not actually be the person who sees many of the employees on a daily basis and may not be the best person to assist, definitely not alone. And companies are spending extensive amount of effort around calibration, calibrating their employees, making sure they have the same standards and levels of performance, and that's exhausting. The company spends tons of time on that, and there's a real question of how efficient that is. And these are just a few of the reasons companies report on why the process is just not working for them. And although some companies are experimenting with throwing out performance management completely, we take the position that performance management is not something we should kill. We shouldn't throw the baby away with the bathwater, but that we need to think about how to do it right. And the managing, differentiating, and rewarding of performance is still important. It just needs to be done in a more effective way that meets today's employees, today's organizations, today's technologies. And I personally like Winston Churchill's quote on democracy is the worst form of government, except all those forms have been tried from time to time. In a certain sense, performance management is the same way. It's not ideal. There are a lot of disadvantages, but it's better than some of the other alternatives, like not having anything. And when we look at what the process is trying to do, so we identify what's really important and not what people have been actually doing and are frustrated about, but what are we really trying to achieve, we find that most companies are trying to achieve 5 basic things and not necessarily feel that they're being successful at it. One thing companies are still trying to achieve is ensuring that every person who comes to work knows every day that they're working on the right things, that they know what good results look like and they can focus on doing that, and that as things change, as priorities change, as focus change for their organization, they continuously are able to do that at any given time. And we know that that's not so trivial in organizations today. We also want to make sure, most organizations also want to make sure that each person, once they know what they should be working on, is actually working on it in a professional, efficient, and effective manner, and constantly improving. So they need to be getting feedback, they need to be getting coaching, they need to be getting the right training and support, the right tools and processes to be able to achieve the results that the company wants them to do. A third thing companies are trying to do is to be able to identify different talent populations out of the workforce. So be able to differentiate people who are identified as high performers, as low performers, and maybe other key populations, people with high potential, people with certain skills or capabilities that match the needs of the company in the future, and so on, each company with its own unique needs. Companies are also trying to differentiate reward and compensation elements, whether it's short-term incentive, long-term incentive based, and be able to tie it in one way or another to the performance of people. And companies are also trying to ensure that employees get the right development and growth opportunities, both to enhance their ability to deliver the current work that they're doing in their current jobs, and also, and primarily in these days with the Y generation and millennials in the workforce, to be able to keep them interested in developing toward the next and future things they're going to be doing in their career, hopefully within the organization. So organizations are trying to achieve these, and when we ask clients, is your performance management really helping and effective at doing these things, most of them would say, not at all. That's not what it's doing. It's a bureaucratic process, which is very annoying and not really helping us achieve these things. When we look at what practices are being developed to address that and to be able to deliver the 5 not so simple things we just said, we're seeing things develop in a number of areas. We're seeing a number of principles that are really affecting the way companies are redesigning their performance management. We're seeing how technology is affecting the ability to do things differently and driving new ways of doing things. And we're seeing how design is changing to better adapt to what companies and employees are looking for in these processes. So I want to talk about each of these briefly. One thing is around the frequency, and many of you answered that you want you want to develop a culture that's more frequent feedback and open feedback. And that's a requirement that employees today are looking for. And organizations have to find a way to address that. We also know that people are growing up in the digital age, are used to getting thumbs up, in any given moment, that they are used to having immediate feedback when they post something to their peers and their friends, and on Facebook, on LinkedIn, waiting for 6 months or a year to get some kind of response about what I'm doing. It really doesn't make any sense in this day and age. We also know that people trust peer-to-peer platforms like TripAdvisor, like Yelp, like Wikipedia, much more today than they trust a single editor or a single person who is recommending something or assessing something. So many of us go into TripAdvisor when we want to choose a hotel or a restaurant, and don't buy a guidebook anymore with specific recommendations. We believe that the masses know what something good is, and we also should look at how that affects the way we look at people in the organization, and how peer-to-peer review and use of reputation capital within an organization is also something that is similar to that and can be implemented within organizations, and people trust that more than one manager who may be very biased, may be personally connected or not around the review of a person. So we're seeing much more frequent designs in the principle, much more peer-to-peer solutions, and much more transparent solutions in the way things look. We also see that technology is really driving a lot of the things that are happening. So new technology is enabling us to do new things in HR, and new ways of doing things in HR is progressing technology. And we see how cloud and mobile platforms, which make information accessible and easy to use, we see how being connected all the time and simple user experience that's designed to do things simply and quickly and not complicated, how big data and analytics is enabling us to do things we couldn't do before around HR, in general and around HR. So those things are driving a lot of the solutions, and Danny will present a lot of the new functionality and capabilities, and SuccessFactors will show you how technology is enabling us to do things that in the past were just too difficult to do in mass numbers, unless you were a really great manager and did the things very naturally. And the other thing that we're seeing in the design companies are doing is that they're simplifying much more of the processes. One of the things we saw over and over again in the past is that companies were trying to do too many things. And I love Dilbert personally. So here's Dilbert saying your user requirements include 400 features. Do you realize that no human would be able to use a product with that level of complexity? So the other person says, good point, I'd better add easy to use to the list. And it doesn't make it easy to use to try to achieve too many objectives. And when we talk to clients, we ask them, what are you trying to achieve in your performance management? And they say all these things. And they say, we want to differentiate, we want to assess employees, we want to engage employees, we want to enforce behavioral competencies, we want to limit legal risk and exposure. And is it a surprise that if we're trying to achieve all these things that it becomes cumbersome and complicated? And so one of the really interesting things that we're seeing companies invest in and think about is how they're segmenting their solutions. So instead of trying to do everything for everyone, to try to do specific things for specific populations. We know that that's true in other areas of HR. Other areas of HR have been segmented for many years. In compensation, for generations, we've had different compensation programs for executives, for sales, for broad-based, for different types of populations in the organization. We don't think that one method of compensating them works for those different populations. In learning and development, we don't think the training for one function or one family or one profession is the same content or approach as others. And we differentiate our learning solutions and our development solutions for different populations, for different jobs in the organization. And all of talent management, by definition, is a segmented approach around selecting specific talent groups and addressing them. Why are organizations in performance management still trying to do one-size-fits-all to cover most of their populations around all those objectives? So one of the key things we've seen is that segmentation needs to be part of the solution around how to make things simple in the future for performance management. So the solutions we're seeing are frequent, they're peer-to-peer, they're transparent, they're using technology. By using segmentation, they're much more simple and focused in design. What does that actually look like? So we've identified 4 different archetypes that organizations are looking at when they're trying to design simple and segmented performance management processes. These aren't the only 4 that exist. There are actually others, but to keep this presentation simple and not go all over the place, we've selected 4 to talk about a little bit, and 2 that we're going to dive into further and also show them in technology. One archetype relates to aligning of goals, aligning of the business objectives, so that the people, particularly the people at the top levels of the organization, are really focused on the right things and can adapt as things change. Engage is around continuous performance management. It's really engaging to workers that isn't short-term goals. It's very focused on development and creating a dialogue. Empower is around creating immediate feedback and making it gamified. So we're seeing in many populations that are very measurable, call centers, sales, help desk, services, that it's possible to design very different ways of performance management that are very fun. They're immediate feedback. They connect performance with learning and performance support systems. Very, very different than what we think about when we think about an annual form. And differentiate is another archetype, which is really around how we calibrate and create the input into talent processes, compensation processes, and other. That now can be much more simple when we're doing other things for most of the populations around feedback and alignment. And each of those can be used for different populations at different points of time. That's what we mean when we say a segmented approach. The align process may be only for top levels of the organization and is very focused on cascading and aligning goals and so on. So different of these archetypes will be used for different populations. I'm going to stop here. We're going to do another poll, and then we're going to dive deeper into engage and differentiate. Okay, very, very interesting. Most of you agreed that, well, the main reason is that managers are not willing to dedicate the time, and also many of you also marked that verbal feedback is easier than filling things out in forms, and that fear of negative feedback is also one of the obstacles to implementing this. So that's, I think, very also aligned with things we see in other organizations, and we're going to talk about a little bit about how to address some of those things. So when we're talking about engage, and we're now diving into the engage archetype, we're really talking about how to create a solution in performance management, which is really much more focused on the, addressing the speed, the expectations, the open feedback, the continuous nature of a dynamic workforce. That is looking at feedback and coaching is something that has to happen all the time. It's part of the basic managerial role. That is much more adept to constant change, to making sure that people are always know what they should be working on and working on the right things and getting the feedback to doing that well. Is focused on growth, so it's a growth mindset approach. And it is recognizing achievement all the time and not just once a year or twice a year. And when we talk about engage, we're seeing 5 key design principles that most organizations who are doing this well are finding to be very valuable. One is rich content. So it's not just about filling in a specific type of form. It's not just about rating people on a few scales. It's really about enabling a mix of type of content, sometimes very simple, sometimes very complicated, but not just numbers, but also ensuring that there's real feedback. There's information about behaviors, around processes. It's full of evidence and real world. Some of that's documented. A lot of it can be verbal. But what people want to know is they really want to understand their performance and not just rate it. So rating and ranking, which was very focused in the past on just giving numbers, doesn't give that kind of rich content and feedback that people expect and want to have today. A second aspect is looking at peer-to-peer or any other kind of multi-assessor approach. So living under the assumption that not only the direct manager and maybe the indirect manager should provide feedback, but multiple people in the organization, even to a degree that anyone in the organization can be able to provide feedback. That feedback could be given upon request, so an employee can ask for feedback from different people in the organization, or it can be given by the initiation of the feedback giver. Because you're working on multiple teams, you're working with different managers in the organization. We know that most people don't do this naturally, and so it's an issue of encouraging and learning to do it. And so most organizations start with simple things that are very, very simple as like, or as simple as an emoji. But then it's slowly, as people learn how to do this and participate in this process, to start providing more richer feedback than just a simple thumbs up or a simple smiley. We know that employees are really concerned, and you mentioned it too in the poll, with negative feedback. It's a lot easier to give positive feedback than to give negative feedback, and we see organizations often starting with positive, only ways of doing this positively versus negative, so peer recognition. Many of you use LinkedIn, and on LinkedIn, you can recognize that someone has a certain capability. You can't say bad things about them. Maybe you can write text, but you can, but a very simple click of a button, you can mark capabilities that people have and endorse someone for a specific skill. If someone has 100+ endorsements of a specific skill, that's a pretty good indication that they're good at it. And it enables people to build reputation capital, something that we find very important in organizations. The skill of having a positive reputation, people want to work with you, is as important as the skills themselves within organizations. So having people think about who I appreciate, who I want to work with, who's getting positive feedback from many of their peers in the organization, internal customers, is very important to drive. We know that continuous feedback has to be frequent and immediate. It has to be easy to do anytime, all the time. It has to be, whether it's pull or push, it needs to be when needed, from the manager, from the employee. Employee can ask for feedback, manager can provide it when they feel that there's been an event or some specific information they want to provide. And one of the things that enables that is mobile devices. Mobile makes it simple and easy, and we see how traffic in Facebook has been driven so much more, and in general and the internet has been driven so much more by mobile devices and mobile access. The same thing is true about making this simple and easy and accessible. We know that the system, the technology, is not everything. In the end, the processes need to design in a way that there's real quality dialogue. That means training managers. That means enabling time. It means creating the culture to have discussions. It's not just about the system, but also there are things in the way we design the system, the process, the feedback, the information, which is important to support dialogue. And we might see some of that. And one of the really critical things is that companies are looking much more at looking forward than looking backward. Of course, you're analyzing people's performance up to date, but it's in a way, and it's about how you talk about what to do with that information moving forward. It's how that information becomes supportive of forward-looking, forward-focused. And we're talking about, instead of feedback, companies are even talking about feed forward as a language to use, which indicates talk about things that happened in the past, but mostly spend most of the time not about analyzing the past, but about thinking about how you can use this information to be better in the future. Okay, so much more coaching, positive learning, growth approach into the way information is delivered and feedback is given. So let's see a little bit from Danny how that translates into, all these principles translate into design of some of these functionality in SuccessFactors. Danny?
Thank you, Etan. Okay, so I'm now going to show you a few nice features that actually support the Engage archetype. So with SuccessFactors, the continuous performance management was introduced about 18 months ago. The benefits of continuous performance management, or CPM as we call it, are that's a tool to capture structured one-on-one meeting. It also provides a real-time feedback and coaching to the employee. It keeps records of discussions of the employees. And yes, it's natively designed for mobile and can incorporate notifications and reports. Some of the items that are recorded in CPM are activity, which is an entity that enables you to keep track of the items you are working on. It can be added by the manager or by the employee and can be linked to one or more of the performance or development objectives the person might have. Another item in the CPM is the topic. So that's an entity that helps you discuss items which are beyond the scope of your current activities during your one-on-one meetings. Topics can be added by the employee or by his manager. And you can see that on screen right now. Achievements allow you to quickly and easily capture the things that have been achieved in real time. It can be added by the employee and manager, and the system allows you to see the achievements and goals, the achievements by a goal or by calendar based, by time. You can see on screen right now how it's designed on the screen. One can record an achievement and link it to a performance or a development goal directly, or one can report many activities and highlight the most important ones as achievements. So in cases where customer is also performing an annual performance evaluation process, these highlighted achievements will be linked to the annual performance form to enrich the content and to enable better feedback. In addition, coaching offers a simple framework for the manager to provide constructive feedback and advice to the employee. As you can see on screen, SuccessFactors is also the perfect tool to enable that in a very simple way. A manager can say one very simple thing that the employee did well and one thing that he should be improved on. SuccessFactors is also a perfect tool to enable peer-to-peer multi-assessment. So the Ask for Feedback feature offers a simple and light experience to support that. Although SuccessFactors has a fully featured 360 rater module, we tend to offer many of our customers to use the softer and more simple functionality. As you can see on the left side, the evaluating manager can ask other stakeholders to send their feedback before actually filling the form on his own. This will eventually enrich the content and will enable him to provide better feedback to the employee. The manager can select internal stakeholders, as you can see on the left side, either peers or any person, as Etan said, in the organization, as well as can choose external stakeholders like customers the employee has been working with. Addressing the need for frequent and immediate feedback can also be achieved by using the rewards and recognition feature. It supports peers and managers' nomination for spot awards, allowing the recognition action to happen as close as possible to the achievement of the employee. What you can see on screen is actually how the manager can see the remainder of the budget he can assign or nominate people to get as a spot bonus or as a recognition bonus. This can also be achieved in the same manner in the mobile platform. Another feature which enriches the manager's ability to provide feedback and promotes the discussion with the employee is what we call the writing assistant. In the global environment, you may have many cases where the manager has to provide his assessment and feedback in different languages, which are not his mother tongue. One might find it very difficult to express himself in that way. Using the writing assistant supports the manager in suggesting topics and phrases he can use. These phrases can differ between the option of saying something to the employee like, you need to improve in that and that, or you meet my expectation in that and that, or you exceed my expectation in that, depending on the message the manager wants to convey. Once the manager is satisfied with the result, the message, where the manager can place the quote in the evaluation form by simply clicking the Place Quote button. The SuccessFactors library contains thousands of content items and can also support custom content of the customer. It also supports core languages, many core languages, and is adopted very well by many customers.
Thanks, Danny. So that was around Engage and how that functionality, the best practices are implemented in SuccessFactors. I wanted to talk about a second of our archetypes, which we call Differentiate, okay, which is really around getting to some form of differentiation of employees. Not necessarily one rating or one ranking, which is what maybe used to exist, not necessarily forced distribution, which is what used to exist, but still understanding how we want to differentiate employees and what parameters we want to know who sticks out, both positive or negative on different things, and how do we enable that in a way that's simple and fast and easy and not bureaucratic and flexible. And a lot of the articles we included in the handout, which I really recommend you read some of these, are still, showing the merit and the value of organizations having a good understanding of their workforce, having a good understanding of their talent, having a better understanding and a richer understanding of who their people are and what capabilities, skills, motivations, growth potential, interests their people have. And so Differentiate is really about helping the organization identify those key things around employees, have a good organizational picture, and be able to use that information for different processes, whether it's talent, moving people around, addressing key business issues, compensating them, and so on. The objective is really here to find those people. So if I skip to what, there's a lot of evidence that this is still important, that organizations still want to be able to differentiate so they can make decisions, that strong people want to work in organizations that recognize the best people and differentiate them, that strong performers leave organizations that don't identify strong people, that don't differentiate on pay, that don't recognize great, exceptional behavior, and that weaker performers will often not select organizations that are more aggressive about this, or discover that it's too hard for them to survive in organizations that actually do this, and so they self-select themselves out even if the organization doesn't necessarily do that. We are looking at much richer ways of assessing people. So one of the things I'm seeing in many of the organizations and a lot of the research is, instead of looking at one rating or one number, is organizations are trying to create a picture that's much richer. It may not even consolidate multiple assessed items into one, because you don't need one number. With all the big data capability and ability to do analytics around people and maintain all these people in technology, organizations are actually creating a much richer profile around their people, and they can use that information for different needs in different situations. The design principles we're seeing organizations doing when designing their differentiation and calibration processes are these. One, making it a lot simpler and quicker for managers to do. Historically, managers used to go in form by form, employee by employee, rate a lot of numbers, then maybe go back and forth, see what I rated different managers and so on. The technology through visualization, through making things very, very simple, and Danny will show how SuccessFactors does that, make it a lot easier for managers to rate different parameters for multiple people in a way that's very natural and easier for them to do. A second item is ensuring that that the way that people are rated and assessed is much more fair, consistent, and unbiased. That's done through technology, and Danny, I hope you're going to relate a little bit to that, but also to the way the information is presented, the way the definitions of the different levels of competency or behavior are defined, so that we ensure that different managers are more consistent in their ratings and there's much less bias in the way managers rate people. It's also critical that this process is linked to other processes. When ranking and rating of any kind or any kind of calibration is just standalone and not linked directly into other processes in a simple and easy way, then it just creates multiple work and difficult things. And of course, SuccessFactors Talent Suite is designed particularly to create the integration between the performance processes, the differentiation and calibration processes, and other HR-related processes, and Danny will show a lot of that. And one of the really critical things is understanding what is actionable in communication. Assuming that a company has solutions like Engage that we described, where employees are getting continuous feedback in a growth mindset, not necessarily everything that happens in the differentiation module needs to be communicated to employees. And then there's an opportunity, you're actually giving feedback and growing people one way and collecting information to drive performance, to drive decisions and other things in another way. And the question is what needs to be communicated in what way, what information, and not necessarily needs to be everything. Although in transparency, we know that it makes sense that many of the things will be communicated, but communicated in an actionable way so an employee knows how to take that information and do something with it, again, to grow and develop. Danny, why don't you show us how those principles are delivered in SuccessFactors?
Thank you, Etan. So yes, we have a lot to show here. I'm not going to show all the functionality around the differentiate archetype because we have many. I'm going to show you a few highlights of the most interesting stuff. So let's start with the StackRanker. The StackRanker, it's shown on the screenshot on the left side, screenshot number 1. It provides a real-time view for the manager, allowing him or her to make better decisions by including fairness and internal equity considerations, and it shows how the employee is ranked against his or her peers. So instead of filling in form by form and having to rate, having the need to rate each one of these competencies per each one of these people separately, what this StackRanker does is it shows everything in one table. And while you're rating one of the employees, you're immediately benchmarking this person to other team members. And while you're doing that, you can also add comments to support your rating, as well as you can see the overall rating of this employee among his team members. So it's doing all of that while you're actually rating them one by one. Another feature which is used by the StackRanker, it can be used by different business scenarios. So for example, in cases of high span of control, like call centers and production floors. The SuccessFactor performance evaluation form enables the manager an online and simple benchmarking shown as well in screenshot number 2. So while you're in a specific form and you're filling in all the details there, all the items one by one, every second you know exactly what's the outcome of your actions and how does this action impact the overall rating of the employee against all his team members. If we move on to the Calibration Tool, which is a very nice feature, this is actually a key functionality to really make a differentiation effective. It can be used as a step in the route map of the annual form or of any other form along the year. At AKT, we find 70% of our customers are using this functionality and are really recommending to continue using that in the future. This tool provides a dashboard-like set of reports presenting aspects like performance versus potential, as you can see on the left side, risk of loss versus impact of loss, in case you analyze that in the employee profile, and reward per versus performance, and many more aspects. In addition to this tool can also serve as a platform to update the specific employee forms while reviewing the overall rating distribution. So as you can see on screen right now, every form was rated in a 1 to 5 on a 5-point scale, rating scale. What we see on screen is a bin view which actually presents how my employees are split or spread along this 5-point scale. And the system can assist by recommending you to move or shift employees from one bin to another. And you can do that by a simple drag and drop using this tool. Once you're done, and it's usually done in a greater scale than only 5 employees, you can have here between 50 to 100 or even more employees, then it really shows you the overall picture and enables you to relate to higher aspects or much broader aspects than a simple form rating. So the tool itself is not just a view tool, but is also a platform to perform mass updates of employees. We, however, recommend not to use more than 2 to 3 calibration steps in a sequence, and not to include more than a few hundreds of employees in one calibration session, because that becomes useless at this point. It's too many employees in one session, and it actually loses point of identifying specific employees and addressing them one by one. This is yet another example of a calibration tool 9-box. What we can see here is the overall potential versus the overall form rating, performance form rating, and we can see our excellent employees. You can see this group is both high potential and high performance, and from this tool itself we can continue and process these employees as a group or as an individual to continue to develop them or to impact their reward in order to retain these people. On the other end of the 9-box, we can see people who are low performance and have low potential, and we should address this in a different manner. So we can take this person specifically and perform an improvement plan for him. On the next slide, you can see an example of a development goal which was derived from a calibration process like that, and from this development goal we also can derive learning activities related to it. And in addition, on the other end, if we want to perform compensation planning processes based on the results we generated in the calibration session or in the calibration tool, we can drive actionable communication through that. All these modules, the calibration and performance and compensation and development, are interlinked together in order to derive one continuous process and not simple separated silos of HR processes. Back to you, Etan.
Thanks, Danny. So that was a little bit of how differentiation and calibration looks in SuccessFactors. So just to summarize, these were a few archetypes we looked at. We dived into engage and differentiate. We didn't give you examples of align and empower, but these and others can be very, very different in the way the functionality and the design of them look. And I think one of the critical things is looking at segmentation, looking at very simple and focused objectives for different populations, and then leveraging the technology in a way that it makes the specific process for that specific population as simple, as easy, and as leveraging technology as possible. So we're out of time. We hope you enjoyed this hour with us. We enjoyed it with you. We'll be happy to be in touch, and have a wonderful day.